So I'm excited to talk to you guys today. I teach anatomy and physiology at Metropolitan State University, so a smaller state school. And I'm kind of hoping to talk about how you can go like beyond courseware and do a little bit more with visible body within your classroom. So I do have a little slideshow for you today, but I'm going to try to make it short. And please feel free to ask questions, throw out ideas. One of my goals for us today is to have this be like a workshop where we can kind of throw ideas back and forth, because you probably have ideas that I haven't tried. And, you know, other people can help refine those ideas too. So it's all good stuff. All right. Now let me, whoops, share my screen. I guess that would help. There we go. And we'll do this, and hopefully this works. Haha. So I'm guessing if you are in person, that one of the images that you are really familiar with is this image over here, which is a lot of students on laptops, which may or may not be paying attention to you, right? They might just be checking Facebook. It's the way the world works. It's okay. You know, then you've got like the worst case scenario, which I get this sometimes too, where they're on their phones and now they're really not paying attention to you. If you're on Zoom, this has changed a little bit, right? Now, instead of looking like this, it looks like this, where you've got a bunch of black screens with names on them and you don't see anyone and you don't see their reaction. You can't tell if they're confused or anything because they're not giving you anything. So how do we get kind of beyond these not so great scenarios into what we really want, which is an interactive class? All right. And there are a couple ways we can do that with visible body. One of these is just through sort of setting your course up in courseware like a flip. Now, what do I mean by that? And I will preface this by saying that I've never gotten my class to be fully flipped. At best, we get a pretty strong lean. But the way that we do it is when I set up my units in courseware, I actually set it up so that the students do some prep before they walk into the classroom. So they've usually, if they have to learn a couple organ names or something like that, maybe we're doing heart, they learn the chambers of the heart before they come in. And then we can actually talk about these things. Now, best practice, always make sure that there's a quiz or something attached to them doing this work before your class, because otherwise they're not going to do it. And if they have to do it before class, then that really does reinforce them. So now what this does, since the students have an idea of where the organs are located, now you can start by talking with them. Okay, why would we have so many? What do you think the blood supply to those organs would be like? If you've had them learn a little bit about homeostasis, one thing I do is I make up cards that go through a couple homeostatic situations. And I say, all right, what's the stimulus? What's the receptor? If we can switch this into asking the students to explain their answer, now they have to give us something back, even if they don't want to turn on their screen. And I understand there are days I don't want to get on my PJs or I don't want people to see my house. So there are days I don't turn off the screen, but that way at least you can get them to talk to you. You can also, once your students have learned a certain amount of information through this courseware setup, you can have them explain like a pathology or case study. Hey, here's a pathology that affects the numbers of insulin receptors on the cells in the body. So what is this going to do to your body's ability to respond to insulin? And you can have those conversations with students about how does this pathology relate to the physiology that you're learning? And that's always that application level of Bloom's, right? We like the application level. So I feel like that is a good organization. I do always have like a unit end quiz, which kind of, here it is, which kind of drives home everything. But the students get really used to, before class, I do this thing, I do a quiz. Now there's something to do. I do a quiz, and we kind of have this rotation. Yes, they take a million quizzes. It's fine. They're like 3 questions. They're fine with it. All right, sorry about that. I backed up. Another example, and this comes from the PathoPhys app. And if you haven't used the PathoPhys app, this is like one of my favorite things. PathoPhys has this beautiful beating heart. And one thing that you can do with this beating heart is you can have it displayed on your Zoom screen, on your projector if you're in person, and you can have the students tell you what's going on. So I've got a little video in my presentation of this heart beating, hopefully, if it works. There we go. So you have them learn the basic anatomy before class, and then you've got this beating heart that they can actually look at, and you can say, okay, you know, start quizzing them on chambers. All right, which valves are connecting these two chambers? Now we turn the blood on. Once we turn the blood on, what is helping that blood? Where is it going? Which chamber does it come in? Which chamber does it exit? You can basically get them to a point where they can build a Wigger's diagram by talking about sort of the volume that's going in the chambers and the electrical activity. And you've got all these tools that you can turn on or off within that PathoPhys app. So it's incredibly powerful. You can even, I slowed it down here when I was taking my video, but you can speed it up, slow it down. And there's so much with the heart that you could do cardiac cycle, and you can also do electrical activity. And so I always think that's kind of fun. All right. So these are my examples of questions to ask the students. And now my computer's freezing. There we go. So basically by asking students sort of leading questions where they can observe the answer, you're kind of having them do a visual experiment. Now, I'm wondering if so far, if I can stop and see if any of you have gotten any ideas of how to use sort of visible body materials to come up with this flip. It's okay
so feel free to post in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand. Oh, we've got somebody raising their hand. So Sandra, I'm going to unmute you, and you just need to unmute yourself on your end. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I am a first year user of this, and I am loving it so far. So I just have to shout out to you guys. One of the things that I use it for, I do most of my class, I would say, is probably about 90% flipped. Students are primarily independent. They do a lot of the assessments on their own. I do set it up so that way I use the timed feature to kind of reduce some of that potential cheating, and I know it's going to be there no matter what we do, right? So with that said, what I've been using a lot of the modules for, as well as the videos within the modules, I actually, I'll watch the modules initially and I'll take little screenshots of them, and then I'll have some guiding questions. So they'll actually do the notes on their own while they watch the videos, while they look at the tutorials. I haven't used the PathoPhys app yet, just because we haven't gotten there yet for some of the lessons. I'm in the lymphatic right now. But I've been doing that a lot. And honestly, it's a totally self-paced course. So, and I just assist them as needed. So I'm kind of just there as backup. And it has absolutely worked wonderfully. I mean, this could be done probably just about 100%. You know, they definitely need a little bit of help from us, obviously, but it is possible. So yeah, I mean, just with a little bit of prep work, you can totally do it.
Yeah. And I do the guided notes as well. And I love that. I love having the questions, because then when they come to class, they'll say, oh, I was in the notes and I missed this one thing. And then it's like when I meet with them on Zoom or in person, it's more of a review.
Exactly.
And that is, they're so much more engaged.
Yes.
So I think that's great. And the PathoPhys app is just, so you can get it through my apps. If you look, it's on the left-hand side in Courseware. And it is so much fun. just to kind of add to these units. So one you probably haven't gotten to yet because you're maybe around there in the semester is urinary. So this is a screenshot from the Pathophys app. And in this screenshot, the app is doing the pathology, which is acute tubular necrosis. And I thought, well, this is a fun one because again, it's the 3D model, you can rotate it around, but you can also tell the students, hey, do you see this necrosis occurring in that proximal convoluted tubule? What would that cause? What's the problem if your proximal convoluted tubule degrades? Now let's talk about the loop of Henle and what problems will we see with loop of Henle degradation? Yes, in tubular necrosis, like the whole tube is going to have problems, but it gets them to think about what are the sections of the tube doing. And you can kind of back up a little bit and have them explain what each section does and then talk about, okay, now what happens if we change it in some way.
Yeah, perfect. I look forward to using that app as well.
It's fantastic. You're going to love it.
Yes.
You're going to love it.
Thank you.
All right. So if you're new to introducing pathology, and some of us are, you know, I always find it kind of strange being an A&P instructor for people who want to be health professionals. And then I'm like, but I'm not a health professional and haven't spent a day in a clinic in my life unless I was sick. But one of the things I like that takes out some of that inertia for me is that if you, in any of the apps, click this little stethoscope icon, and I just took this screenshot from Atlas, you'll get a series of these pathologies, and you can actually use those pathologies. You could hand one to every student and have the students explain their pathologies when they come to class. And you could even call it out. Who has the pathology that affects the atria? Who has, you know, and go through the heart in the order that you want, but using pathology as that learning mechanism to kind of engage some more critical thinking and discussion. All right. One thing I do with my students is I have them make patient information pamphlets. So they have to do one for every system. And the patient, or I say one every system, it's actually like one every, they have to choose one system for every exam. They have to explain it in layperson's terms. They have to explain pathology, what anatomy is affected, what physiology is affected, and how. And I find that that is a really difficult exercise for them because they have to go to those layperson's terms, and that's hard. But it's also something they really love doing, and it teaches them a lot about the system that they talk about. And I want to move it up to doing every system because these are a 1 to 2 page assignment, and they really have to explain what they know about that system. So it's a really nice, fun one. And I think that there's several alternatives to this kind of thing where you could have the student maybe explain in a video, even using their visible body visuals about a pathology. Like, this is where it would affect the organ, and this is why it affects the physiology. And they can actually string together things using the devices that they have on hand, which I'm always a big fan of. I never want to cost them any more money. Atlas has a bunch, well, actually all the apps do, but it's a little bit more, I think the Atlas one is the best. Atlas has a way to draw on the model in 3D. And so this is another thing students could do. They could kind of annotate. And I'm thinking, you know, because of these heart defects, right? Maybe they're going to talk about coronary artery. They're going to say, hey, here's where the coronary artery is, and this is what it's doing. And it gives them a way to actually mark that and talk about it. And you can, in Atlas, draw on it and retain that 3D rotatability. So they can actually talk about a structure, but if it's impacting something on the other side, they can rotate it around. All right, so I'll take a break again and throw it out to you guys. Does anyone have any ideas or things that they do that they really like in terms of assigning? I don't know if you assign pathologies for students or assigning them little things that they have to explain.
Yeah, feel free again. You can raise your hand or post something into the chat. We can also show you where to find this content inside of courseware. If we can do that after too, Cindy.
For sure.
If anyone wants to take a walk through. Let's see, so I don't see any other.
We can keep moving and kind of hold it on to the end. I think I give myself like water breaks.
Oh, that's important.
So one thing I love to do, I'm a big fan of modeling and diagramming. This is like my happy place in life. So this is an example of a student prompt for the heart. You have to draw me a heart, label the chambers, the valves, the major vessels, and indicate where the blood is going. And I'm really lucky. My whole classroom is whiteboard. All the walls are whiteboard. So this is what it typically looks like. We draw on the walls, and the students really love that because there's something that just is so naughty about drawing on walls. And this is actually a student drawing that we ended up with. And you can see the detail they get. What the students will do is they'll usually have visible body on one of their devices, and they'll be holding the device and they'll be working with members of their group, helping them and saying, oh, this goes here, this goes here. This is the label for this structure. And it allows them to kind of teach each other. You could even do this on pieces of paper. You can do this on, I've had little, they call them lap boards. It's a little tiny whiteboard, and had the students work on those. But it's a really good way to get them to kind of express that anatomy knowledge and just give them a different way to internalize how to get it into their head. So we've been, we do this all the time. This is kind of one of my Cindy needs a break things. And then what you do, when one group finishes drawing, you have another group come and check. And so now they're self-checking. For an online environment, this is a little more difficult, but not unachievable. You can do breakout rooms. You can do, like there are virtual whiteboards that students can use that are collaborative spaces. There are ways to do it. You just have to think outside the box a little bit in terms of softwares. This is another example that we do pretty commonly. Vessels, super hard for students to learn. I feel like that's one of those units where their eyes just like pop out of their heads and they're like, I just learned the heart. Why are you doing this to me? So we start by drawing the vessels, and it starts with very simple. I have a very simple prompt that starts from the heart and says, here are your different branches, and they kind of label them going down. And then sometimes we get out of the classroom, and when we get out of the classroom, I have a deck of cards, and each card has a different vessel name on it. I just printed them on my computer and paper cut, right? And I don't even separate them by what body part it goes into. I just hand each group a stack and I say, okay, group A, you're gonna do head, group B, you're gonna do thorax, C, abdomen, leg, arm, and you just rotate it around. And I've got the students working in groups. We tape out these like crime scene tape things on the floor, and then have them put the cards as labels on strings, which are the vessels. And so you can see in this one, as if you look really closely, she's got visible body up on that laptop, and here's visible body again. And they're running strings down the arm, and they're trying to figure out what is the circulation of the arm and what vessels go under what. And the great thing about string is I can check and I can be like, this one shouldn't be on top. This one should be on top. And I tell them whenever they connect, you have to put a knot in there because those are physically connected. They doing this very often notice that difference between the celiac trunk and the hepatic portal, where hepatic portal doesn't connect back where you think it should, and celiac trunk does. They notice that very quickly, and they don't typically get that in a 2D scenario because the images are all straight from the front. So they always think that that hepatic portal connects back to the vena cava, and because the celiac trunk does, why wouldn't the hepatic portal? And now you can engage them in that question of, well, why wouldn't it? You want to filter the blood before it goes back to general circulation. One step further on this one is these handouts, and these may even be in the visible body instructor materials. These are just flow charts, and I've got little notes, liver, ovaries, whatever it happens to be, and the students use visible body and they follow along a vessel. And my thought was, it's like giving someone directions where they have to fill in the street names. So they're filling in the name of the vessel as they're going through this, and then they can check their work later. If we go one step further from that, and this is something I have not used in my A&P class, I did use it in my Gen Bio class, loved it, and decided that it was something that I want to start really thinking about seriously as an exam alternative. So these are graphic notes, and in my Gen Bio class, we hit that unit where you're teaching them about cellular respiration, fermentation, photosynthesis. And I was thinking, there's no way I can write a good test on this. I'm worried that they're going to cheat because it's a digital environment, and I just needed some other way to have them express their knowledge. And so I said, okay, we're going to diagram cell respiration. What I want you to do is give me a 1-sentence description of what's going on in each stage and why. And in this case, they were even allowed to submit drafts for revision, but my comments on the draft were just not enough detail or not summarized enough detail. I don't want you to photocopy your textbook, right? So this student did a beautiful job, which is why I'm showing off her work. You can see that it's add 2 carbons to the 4-carbon sugar. Now take an isomer. This oxidizes and that makes the CO2 pop off, and now this happens. So she really kind of explains that. And my thought was, if they have something like this and they go into another class and cell respiration comes up, they can take these notes out and they can very easily recall that information and use it. And just the act of making this helped the students to better understand the material. So now let's move this into A&P. You could do this with any unit. I'm stuck on heart today because I am, but you could have them use still images from visible body, and they could talk about the heart and have the outside, then cut it open, have it all labeled, talk about the roles of the different parts. You could have another panel for cardiac cycle, another panel for ECG, and maybe one for pathology, and that might be all you need to show that they have competency in that unit. And I know it's kind of out there, but I thought it could be a nice, healthy alternative to exams and basically are like constantly worrying about cheating that we're doing right now. So it was successful for me. I really want to keep going with it. You could have students submit a video dissection. It's actually not that hard this is me just using my cell phone, but you can enable screen recording and then you can do some kind of dissection. There are other softwares that would allow them to do call outs. So this could be a way to see, can they dissect something? Downside of you is that you'd have to watch the videos, but it probably takes less time than grading an essay to watch a video of students dissecting something. Excuse that was the dogs. I'm sorry about that. Another thing you can do is you can have them build some sort of system from the body. One thing that I have used is I've actually gone through and created a disarticulated skeleton. And this one's not completely disarticulated because I did this for my human bio class, but the students had to cut these shapes out and fit them together. And I just had them glue them to, old school overhead acetate. It's very cheap. I had them glue it to those so that they could have some be in front and some be in the back. And then they could write labels on and test themselves. And it was a really cute project. It kind of helped them to look at the shapes of things a little bit more. You could go a step further from that and have them actually make bones out of clay or whatever and send you pictures of that. And I've done tasks like that I don't know, before. I just have them send me pictures. We've also done where they have to do a process and they'll put note cards in order and they'll send you a picture of, of their note cards in order. And one of the things you can do with your students, because I know it can be really hard to just come up with lecture ideas. And one of the most rewarding, beautiful things that I did after I had, I think it was my second year with Visible Body, I switched to lecturing using tours. And basically in Atlas, there's this tour function where you can set up the images you get. So I've got a, where are the kidneys? And it's basically a thorax. And we can talk about where are the kidneys in space. And then we can talk about blood flow to the kidneys. And then we can talk about the cross section and just basically keep working our way smaller and smaller in the anatomy. And having that set up as a tour already, all it means for me is I click like I would a slide, but I get that beautiful Visible Body 3D model. This is really useful online. It's also really useful in person because it gives you just a way to talk to the students and show them those models and just kind of walk them through from, you know, basically outside in. Once you save this tour, you can use this as something to lecture from. I almost always recommend like a guided note, like we talked about earlier with this sort of thing. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have guided notes, there are some in at least the semesters and courseware that I wrote. There are guided notes and they're Word documents that you can edit and make your own. And I recommend that. And that way the students have something to write on and that has images in it while you're flipping from one image to another. I think that way they take less of a back seat. If you're not using slides, you can actually say, who can tell me what this is? And you can talk a little bit more and it's a little less automatic for us than when we go on slides. So now I can really throw this out for ideas. And I really just think we should talk about ideas. Feel free to ask questions about anything that I have done. Feel free to bring up problems that you've had. I mean, we've all been through some crazy teaching things. There are things that I've never gotten in my hands. And I know that sounds absurd to many of you, but it doesn't. So let's throw out ideas and just talk.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Excuse me. So yeah, feel free again, post questions in the chat and we want to hear from you. We want to hear how it's going, whether you're using Visible Body or not. Like how are those Zoom classes going? I have 2 high schoolers, so I feel for the teachers on the other end because I know it's like the sea of hoodies and they kind of sit back. They don't want to talk. The kids feel awkward. So we'd love to hear, you know, basically how it's going. And you know, of course, any questions you have. And again, we can also walk through those content areas in Visible Body courseware and show you where those live. Let's see, is there anybody? We could do that. Maybe how about we do a little walkthrough? Got some time. Cindy, do you want to do it, or Kara or myself could do it? It's up to you.
I can totally do it. Just let me catch up really quick. It's a way I can just share my iPad. Let me see if I can do that.
Sure.
All right, are you seeing the iPad?
Yep.
Yay, okay, I did it. So this is looking at Atlas. And in Atlas, one of the things that I talked about was setting up a tour. The way that you can set up a tour is that you basically make several images favorites. So let's say you want one of the brain, but you don't want all these pesky vessels in the way. We can just get rid of those. And now we've got the brain and we say, okay, this is exactly the view I want. So I save that view by pushing the little star. And there we go. And then that view will now be in my favorites. So when you go to your favorites, go back to the menu, go to my library. Now I'm looking at my favorites. You can see that sort of in the gray. If I go to tours and I want to create a tour, the way that I do that is you just click start and you can just pick whichever of those favorited views work best for that tour. And you can make one for every system, which I find really great. And I don't know, it's just helpful to me to kind of have it queued up so that I don't have to dissect things down while I'm talking to people, because that's like patting your head and rubbing your belly. That's hard. So one thing that you are able to do with Visible Body, and you could use this as a student assignment, is you could have them come up with a view and then email it to you. And that's just through that email button. And that's another way you could have them turn in an assignment. All right. So let's think of other things we talked about. Oh, we talked about drawing. You just use the little draw button and you pick the depth. And this one, it seems a little weird at first, but once you play with it, you get used to it. And let's say we want to mark a structure. We can go ahead and do that. And now that structure is on our drawing and it will actually rotate around with our drawing. So if you wanted students to really annotate something, they could annotate it and you'd be able to see those annotations. It's also really good for you as a lecturer too. As you're talking to people, you can be like, oh yeah, these are the parts we're interested in, or this is the flow of information during a reflex, or whatever it happens to be, you can draw that in. And it gets to be very helpful. Trying to think of what else we talked about. We talked about pathophys, so let me take you out to that. This is P and P. So it's pathophysiology or pathology and physiology. Physiology and pathology. I knew I'd get close.
And so Cindy's on her iPad. So as some of you may know, that a courseware account for students comes with web access to all of these apps, as well as mobile downloads. And the mobile downloads work on all mobile devices. So iPads, iPhones, or Android phones or tablets. They get one download, so they have to choose which device to download it to. But the beautiful thing is that the content is the same, whether you're launching it in a web browser or you're using it on the mobile device. So it's completely the same.
Yeah, I always like my personal is I like the download because I think it's just faster. Although that's been getting even better. So the nice thing about Pathophys is you've got all these different systems in here. Now it's not all of them, but there are more coming out all the time. So whatever unit you want to do, you're going to get physiology and pathology videos, models, whatever. And a lot of these, some of these are stills, but then there are other ones that they're so gross looking. There are other ones that they can actually rotate around, and that's super fun. This is the beating heart, which I have mad love for the beating heart. You can choose to put in ECG, you can choose to put in the electrical pathway. You get to choose, and then you can still rotate it. I don't think anyone else has that. There we go.
Cindy, sorry, we had a question from Sandra about can you share or send the tours that you create with students? At this point, no, although that is being introduced, I believe, in the next iteration, right, Emily? So we'll have that soon.
Yeah, we're looking to January for that.
Yep. So you'd be able to share those tours, you know, that you built with your students then.
Yeah, and I think that once we can share tours, right, as an instructor, that's the game changer, because now you can have the students work with you and they can create note cards. They can do all sorts of things with their models while they have them open. So it's really going to take us to like that next level that we all want to get to. A lot of these pathophys things are set up like tours, where they'll actually have sort of click-throughs that you can do. It's a fun app. It's really fun to work with. And particularly, I have a good time kind of going through here and saying, okay, I'm teaching, you know, lung right now. Let's look at, you know, tuberculosis, and okay, what's going to happen with these gnarly lungs? How's that going to feel? So it's just another way of getting the students to relay that information. This one brings up too that you also have medical scans in there. Medical scans and cross sections are a great way to look at students' 3D thinking. And that's one of the things that we want them to be able to do, right? Just know that a person is not a piece of paper. There we go. So I see one question in the chat about wanting to know, to narrow down what they need for each system. And it depends a little on what you want. But there are at least guided notes for one of the 2 semester courses, because I wrote it. They're my guided notes, and that should help. Every now and then I go overboard. So my background is in sensory neuroscience. So the sensory systems unit is gigantic. It happens. And I do find as instructors, we're always running behind at the end of the semester. And I feel like at the end, my sort of, that's where reproduction and development are. Those get very truncated. Although now I'm getting better with my timing. So hopefully that'll help you. I actually find the A&P app to be a pretty good guide because it's got learning objectives attached to it. And I'm a big fan of learning objectives attached to things. So I think that would really help you in that case. I'm trying to think of other visible body things we're going to show off. I can show off the learning objectives just because they're there and they're good to know that they're there. So if you go to this checklist, that's got learning objectives, and they actually can put little dots on them, and it'll take them to the part that explains about them. Every now and then I'll look at a learning objective and I'll be like, I don't care. They don't need it. They're not going to remember it. And then I cut it out. I like to keep it simple. So.
And this is the A&P app, like Cindy was saying, and I agree. We give that advice all the time. When you're starting, the anatomy and physiology app is the best place to start for the content, because it's already done. This is already curated to a 2-semester anatomy and physiology course. The topics are presented in a pedagogical order, you know, going from broad to specific. So you can assign a chapter or, you know, several sections, and the content's already baked for you.
You know, and I feel like there's something beautiful about, like, for me, I had this progression. The first app I used was A&P, and I was like, okay, this is like a textbook. I understand it, because anytime a student opens one of the units, right, there's text that kind of gives them an idea of what they're supposed to do. There are little hot links. Perfect. And then I hit Atlas, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with Atlas? And in the beginning, those were the 2. And Atlas became more of me giving them a guide and saying, I want you to be able to do this by the end. And now we're translating that into assignments. So one of the things that you can do is have each person discuss one part of the heart, and then you put a bunch of them together and you've got the whole heart. So we can actually do a little bit more with those dissections, but Atlas needs more explanation. I feel like the animations the students love, and that's a really easy one for an assignment. Once you get into pathophys, this is, this is like the new kid on the block, and pathophys is a little more, I looked at it, I was like, dang, that's cool. How do I use that? And the answer is really in using things like the beating heart, and then also using these pathologies and saying, okay, let's look at arteriosclerosis, and let's talk about how this plaque is forming. And okay, here's the plaque. Now it's so narrow. What's that going to do to blood flow? And what are the symptoms going to be? What do you think is going to be happening to the area on the opposite side of that clot? So this to me became a way to get that application level, which is what I really, really wanted in my students. There's, I mean, of course they have to be able to label things, but you also want them to apply that knowledge.
Thanks, Cindy. Any other questions or any, really about anything that we're talking about today, or any content that you would like to see or take a deeper dive into? We're happy to do that.
Or even if you've got a problem you've been having with the class and you want help troubleshooting, I love doing that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm curious too as to how it's going online. We talk to instructors often, but it'd be great to hear from the group here what, how is it going?
Okay.
I'm gonna just check. So we don't have anybody with their hands raised or any questions in the chat. So we can wrap up, or Cindy, did you want to show anything else? I think.
I think those were my kind of big ideas. Obviously I wouldn't do all of them at once if you haven't done any of them, but I think just try out that courseware flip and try to think about, because now we're all with online thinking about bite-sized assignments. How can we do something in 15 minutes? And you can totally set it up in courseware where they watch even a video of you lecturing and then maybe do a dissection. And then the next day you can hold them accountable for knowing that information and really have them lead the review. Okay, what did we learn? What are we still confused about? And it's a way to just change that discussion so that you're asking questions instead of telling things a little bit more. So at least that would be my recommendation. I know one of the big questions I get all the time is about labs and what am I going to do about labs. And that's a tough one. And they're the pre-made labs, but then it's like, well, how do I think outside the box? And that's where I think these sort of more pathology related discussions help. Yeah, managing larger classes is horrible. The comment from the chat right now is managing larger classes online or in person it's way harder to engage folks. And I noticed that. And man, there's this space in the room. It's in the way back of my classroom. And I can look at that space and I know you're not going to pass if you sit there. And I can tell them that on the first day and say, no one that has sat in that row has passed the class. And people still sit there. It's like they think I'm lying to them or something. So sometimes I just stand back there and teach and see if they move away from me. But I think it is a lot harder. I think if we, at least, even if you just tell the students ahead of time and say, okay, you 10 students are responsible for relaying information on the heart. You 10 are responsible for this. It's going to get engagement and you're going to be able to kind of share the love, but it's also going to take some work off of you because right now, and I was talking to a first year faculty member like 15 minutes before this call, and I was like, you just need to survive. Like that's your goal. One foot in front of the other and just make it through. And it's okay if it's a little bumpy. It's about, it's about the process. It's about what you're learning. So, you know, I think at this point, by sort of moving more to more of the responsibility onto the students, and having them relay that information, that holds them accountable, which is great because they don't want to look like an idiot. And it takes it off of you. And the more you can take off of you, the better. Plus, they also listen to each other better.
Thank you so much, Cindy. This has been really valuable. I hope it's been valuable to all the attendees. We are recording, so we will post the recording. And please do feel free to reach out to the education team here at Visible Body. Any of the forms on our website go to human beings, so you can fill out those forms, or feel free to contact us here. We can get you in touch with your rep. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. Have a great holiday next week, a nice break. And thank you so much, Cindy, for your time today.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. And I hope that this helps. I hope it kind of helps to lighten your load and just have fun ideas of things to do.
All right, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.